Members of the Commission, might we please request permission for once Ms. De Souza is sworn, she could be seated.
Notice that she's walking with a stick, and I'm sure that that is not for style purposes. Yes. Please sit as soon as you have been sworn and make yourself comfortable.
If you would raise your hand, please, Ms. De Souza. Ms. Karen De Souza, do you solemnly and sincerely affirm that the evidence that you shall give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I so affirm.
Thank you.
For the purposes of the record, could you please state your entire name?
I'm Karen Audrey De Souza.
I think you're speaking there a little quickly. Hello.
Karen Audrey De Souza.
Yes, I'm hearing you clear now.
Now, Ms. De Souza, are you currently employed?
I am fully occupied. I take employment to mean I'm paid. I'm not.
All right, could you indicate to the court what, if any, organizations you're involved in at this time?
I'm the full-time coordinator of Red Thread, which is a women's organization.
Now, Ms. De Souza, did you at some point in time sign a statement and a document in relation to the Walter Rodney Commission of Inquiry?
I did.
And if you were to see the statement and the transcript you signed, you would be able to identify same?
I would.
And how would you identify it?
By the contents of the documents and by my signature at the end of the document.
Respectfully seeking leave of the Commission through Mr. Jairam to have the documents, the statement, and the extract shown to Ms. De Souza.
Please proceed.
Grateful, sir. You're saying, sorry. No problem.
These are the documents that I signed.
Grateful. Now, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, respectfully seeking leave to have Ms. De Souza's statement and the extract she signed to be tendered and marked as exhibits within these proceedings. Suggested marking KDS-1 for the statement and KDS-2 for the extract.
Statement and extract are so tied. Statement and extract are so tied. KDS-1 and KDS-2.
Grateful, please, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
And the extract is from what, please?
The extract is from a testimony, a record of the testimony Ms. De Souza gave at an inquest. Coroner's inquest. Yeah. Now, Ms. De Souza, the extract which you would have signed and you identified a few moments ago, do you recall where the extract was taken from?
The extract of the inquest, this is what you're asking about, would have been taken from the proceedings of the coroner's inquest into the death of Walter Rodney.
Okay. Now, Ms. De Souza, other than the coroner's inquest, did you ever give evidence at any other forum in relation to the death of Walter Rodney?
Judging by the documents shown to me, I did. I have no recollection, however, of giving those statements.
Now, Ms. De Souza,
One moment, please. I thought your question was, other than the inquest, did you, so apart from the inquest, Ms. De Souza, did you testify in any other, before any other body or forum concerning Dr. Walter Rodney's death?
Not that I recall.
Thank you.
now, Ms. De Souza, in 1980, were you a member of the Working People's Alliance Party?
I was associated with the Working People's Alliance.
And through your association, did you know someone by the name of Walter Rodney?
I did.
And how did you come to know Walter Rodney?
I had met him at, I think, a building that was the WPA Center, Working People's Alliance Center. I had met him at the university campus, and I had met him at the home of Walter Rodney.
When was the first time, if you can remember the exact year, that you first met Walter Rodney?
It might have been in 1978.
In 1978. Now, Ms. Rodney, sorry, Ms. De Souza, when you met Mr. Rodney in 1978, were you active in any of the meetings held by the Working People's Alliance?
I was not.
Did you attend any of the meetings held by the Working People's Alliance?
In 1978, I don't think so.
In the year 1979, did you attend any meetings?
Yes, I did.
Approximately how many meetings would you say you attended for the Working People's Alliance in the year 1979? A rough figure.
I don't know, lots.
A lot.
Yeah.
Now, while you were present at any of these meetings, Ms. De Souza, were there any interruptions of those meetings?
Yes.
Could you describe to the members of the Commission some of these disruptions that would have taken place in your presence?
Some of the meetings were broken up by a unit of the police that we called at that time the Death Squad. Some of the meetings were broken up. These would be mainly meetings in Georgetown. Were broken up by a group called the House of Israel.
Now, you refer to the Death Squad of the police. That would be a squad attached to which police force?
The Guyana Police Force.
And was there anything distinct about the Death Squad that differentiated them from other ranks of the Guyana Police Force?
They wore plainclothes and they were particularly vicious.
That
Vicious.
wasn't well heard here. Perhaps you need to go a little closer. We didn't pick you up here.
I will move the chair.
Ms. De Souza, just for the record, we did not get your last answer.
I said they wore plain clothes and they were particularly vicious.
Would you care at this time, Ms. De Souza, to explain to the members of the Commission what you mean by they were vicious?
The attacks by the Death Squad tended to be, they tended to be armed with hockey sticks, with police batons, and they seemed not to have no problem with using these on people who were unarmed.
And when you say using them, what did you observe them doing with these hockey sticks and batons?
Hitting.
Ms. De Souza, were you ever hit with any of these
No, I wasn't.
objects? At this time, are you able to identify from your memory any names of persons known to you as being a member of the death squad?
The one name that I remember is Fanfare.
We didn't get that name.
Fanfare,
Fanfare?
yes.
That's also known as?
No, that was, as far as I'm aware, that was his last name.
Fanfare.
And you do not know him by any other name other than Fanfare?
No.
And is there any particular memory that you have of an incident regarding Fanfare?
Not really, no.
Not really. You also mentioned during your evidence earlier that the members of the House of Israel would disrupt meetings.
Correct.
Is there any particular means by which you were able to differentiate the members of the House of Israel from, say, the members of the death squad?
Sometimes they were dressed in the House of Israel uniform.
And could you please just explain to us what those uniforms were, either by color?
It was red, green, black.
What is this House of Israel, though, council that she's referring to?
Yes, ma'am. Now, Ms. De Souza, you referred to House of Israel and you said they normally were identified by a particular uniform worn. But could you explain to the members of the commission exactly what was the House of Israel?
I believe it was a religious group. What I can say about them, they had a radio program which was religious, that some of the members sold plantain chips, and that they broke up meetings. I can't tell you anything else about them.
And that they broke up meetings. Are you aware of any particular member of the House of Israel who you would have observed breaking up meetings?
No.
Are you aware of any member of the House of Israel by their name?
No, I don't know. Beyond the leader of the House of Israel, who was Rabbi Washington, who very often was on the radio programs. That's the name that I know. Another name was published after Father Dark was killed, and that's a person that was sentenced for the murder.
You recall that name?
No, I don't.
You can't recall the name.
Now, Ms. De Souza, you sure that you accurately described the House of Israel as a religious group? I've never heard or known of a religious group that broke up political meetings. You sure you're accurate in describing them as a religious group?
There are many different kinds of religious groups, sir.
Some kind of quasi?
Pardon?
Kind of quasi-religious?
I don't know about quasi. I mean, they had religious programs on the radio.
No, I'm hearing you, but I've never known of a religious group that has as its objective breaking up political meetings too.
One would prefer that religious groups not engage in the other activities that I described, but that was the reality.
All right.
Are you aware, Ms. De Souza, of the House of Israel having any political affiliations with any political party?
I certainly assume that they were affiliated with the People's National Congress.
And what led you to that assumption, Ms. De Souza?
I guess the adversarial relation between the People's National Congress and the Working People's Alliance, and the fact that the police who broke up meetings were under the instruction of the People's National Congress, that the House of Israel was also breaking up meetings. My assumption, therefore, was that they were under the same instructions.
A few moments ago, Ms. De Souza, you referred to the People's National Congress as an adversary. That would be an adversary to the Working People's Alliance?
Correct.
Would you care at this time to explore for the members of the Commission what you mean by that phrase, that they were adversaries to the Working People's Alliance?
The Working People's Alliance, as I understood it, was totally opposed to many of the policies and the, I guess, behaviors of the People's National Congress, which was the government of the day. And at public meetings, in leaflets, in the one sheet, the news sheet that was distributed, there were many criticisms. Yeah, so they all indicated that the WPA was not a friend of the PNC.
And
You're
that-
talking about the WPA?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
And these leaflets and the one-page news,
They Clean, yes.
They
It was
Clean.
called They Clean.
who were responsible for those publications?
Various senior members of the WPA.
Now, the writings were published by the senior members of the WPA, stating that the policies, just for clarification, the policies of the PNCR government at the time were not friendly to the people.
Correct. I mean, yes, so there were various different issues that would have been explored in those documents. But essentially, they were all critical
Of the government.
Of the government, yes.
Now, was there any reaction from your recollection of the government in relation to those publications made by the WPA?
You mean beyond the breaking up of political meetings and arrests and imprisonment of various WPA members?
So there were arrests and imprisonment of WPA members. Could you elaborate on that particular aspect, Ms. De Souza? Who were arrested?
I was.
You were arrested. On how many occasions were you arrested?
Too many to count.
Too many to count. Now, Ms. De Souza, on the occasions that you were arrested, is there any particular incident in which you were arrested too that is striking in your memory right now? Did they tell you why I'm arresting you?
I guess the only really striking one is the first time that I was arrested.
And that was in relation to what?
It was following, I don't remember if it was the day after, but it was following the fire that destroyed the Ministry of National Development.
And that fire would have occurred sometime in July of 1979?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. And were you the only one who was arrested in relation to that fire, Ms. De Souza?
No, several persons were arrested. I think maybe 7 or 8 persons were arrested.
7 or 8 persons. At this time, would you be able to share with us the names of the persons who were arrested along with you?
Well, not along with me. I was probably the last person arrested.
You were the last one arrested?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. So do you remember who else was in custody at the time you were taking it?
A friend of mine from UG, Devo, Rupert Rupnarain, Benita Harris, her 4-year-old son, Zaman Harris, Walter Rodney, Kwame Apata, Omawale. I think that's it. And then I was arrested.
You saw them when you were taken into custody?
I saw some of them when I was taken into custody.
How many of them would you have seen? Can you remember at this time?
Three. I saw 3 of them.
You saw 3 of them. Can you call the names of the three you would have seen?
Devo, who was the friend from a fellow student, Benita Harris and Zaman Harris.
You said Benita Harris and her 4-year-old son.
Correct.
You actually saw the 4-year-old son
I
in
did.
custody?
Yes.
And where did they have the 4-year-old child?
CID headquarters.
Could you tell the members of the commission how long you were kept in custody on that particular occasion?
I think I was held for 3 or 4 nights.
3 or 4 nights. Could you tell the members of the commission what your treatment was like during that period you were kept in custody?
I don't know that I think actually that the conditions at the East Penitence Women's Prison lockups were a lot better. They weren't pleasant, but they were a lot better than they are now. They smelled exceedingly bad. They were inhumane, in a word.
They were
But in terms of treatment, I was not treated any worse than any other prisoner. I mean, the police in the station seemed rather afraid, actually, while I was in custody.
I'm not getting the last part of the sentences. The police seemed rather afraid, and then something
While I
else.
was in custody.
Thank you.
Were there any periods of questioning in relation to the fire? Did you undergo any questioning?
I was questioned on the day that I was held, the afternoon that I was held. I was questioned fairly intensively, yes.
By who?
First by Skip Roberts, and then by a couple of police officers. I think their names were McCrae and Lamb, but I'm not absolutely sure. McCrae.
McCrae and Lamb?
Yeah.
Now, who was Skip Roberts at that time? Are you aware?
I believe he was the crime chief.
And what about McCrae? Are you aware of maybe his rank or his position in the Guyana Police Force?
No, he seemed to be fairly senior.
A senior. And what about Lamb? Are you able to give us any other descriptions?
No.
Now, just one more bit of detail. Could you tell the members of the commission exactly where you were at the time you were arrested and taken to CID?
I was at CID.
You were there.
Yeah.
What were you doing there at the time, Mr. Souza?
I'd heard that Rupert, Walter, Benita, and Zaman had been arrested, and with a friend decided to take something for them to eat.
Do you care to state the name of your friend?
Not particularly.
All right, Mr. Souza. Now, when you were released after spending 3 to 4 nights in custody, were you ever charged with any offenses in relation to the fire?
No, I was not.
Are you aware of anyone else being charged in relation to that fire?
Yes.
Could you tell the members of the commission who these charges were instituted against?
Walter Rodney, Rupert Rupnarain, and Omawale were charged for arson.
You heard the names?
Could we get the full name of the last person?
Great. Mrs.
That is his full name. One name.
Could you repeat the name just for
Omawale. Omawale.
Omawa. Were any charges instituted against you for any other offense?
Yes.
What offense were you charged with, Ms. De Souza?
I was charged for larceny of National Service Kit.
And this was around the same time the charges were instituted against Walter Rodney, Rupert Ryan, and the others?
On the same day, yes.
On the same day. At the time you were charged, could you tell which magistrate you prepared before? Can you remember the name of the magistrate?
I believe it was Oscar Parvatan.
Oscar Parvatan. Parvatan, P-A-R-V-A-T-A-N. Now, Ms. De Souza, could you share with the members of the Commission what happened in relation to this charge that was instituted against you? Was there a trial?
There was. Since the offense was supposed to have been committed in Berbice, my case was transferred to Weldad and Fort Wellington courts. And the trial essentially went on for about 6 years. I think it ended in 1985.
It ended in 1985. Could you say who was the presiding magistrate at the time your matter was completed?
I think his name was Singh. I don't remember.
And what was the outcome of that trial that was completed in 1985?
I don't remember the technical language, but essentially it was that no conviction was recorded.
No conviction was recorded. Was there ever a finding of guilty or not guilty? Can you recall?
I don't think there was. Chief Justice might remember. He was prosecuting me at the time.
Miss, and who is the Chief Justice that, just for the record, what's the name of the person who prosecuted you?
Ian Chang.
Ian Chan.
Ms. De Souza, in the law there's something called reprimand and discharge, where no conviction is recorded.
I actually do not remember exactly what the magistrate said.
Because when counsel asked you whether you're found guilty or not guilty, I think your answer wasn't clear to me.
I said I don't remember. I don't think that the magistrate said anything that was clear to me at the time.
Okay, thank you.
Are you aware of any reason why your trial would have taken so long to be completed?
In the first instance, because the lawyers were unable to travel for some of the fixtures, and then it was that Mr. Chang wasn't available for some of the fixtures. I am not aware of any other reasons.
Any other reason? Was evidence actually taken in the matter in your presence?
Yes, there was.
Can you remember the name of any policeman?
I'm sorry, I was just wondering whether counsel was from abroad.
I can ascertain that, sir. I will.
Yes, thanks.
I will. First things first, Ms. De Souza. Can you remember any names of witnesses who would have offered evidence against you in that trial?
I only remember the National Service officer that came to give evidence.
You remember by name?
I think his name was Van Kooten.
Van Houten. And Ms. De Souza, your counsels, are your counsels locally based councils or overseas based councils?
They were local.
Could you provide us with their names?
Peter Burton, who is now deceased. What's his name? Malcolm Taharali, until I fired him. And then I defended myself.
And then you defended yourself
Yes.
until she fired him. Now, Ms. De Souza, are you aware of what would have happened to the charge in relation to the arson instituted against Walter Rodney, Rupert Rupnarayan, and others?
I'm not sure. That also dragged on for a long time, and then, I don't know, it just kind of disappeared.
Counsel, did his death not bring that to an end?
In relation to him, but there were 4 other persons who were charged, along with Walter Rodney for the arson.
2 others.
Two
Two others for
Two
arson.
other persons.
Well, I've never read of any outcome of that arson trial, so I just wondered if it did not fall away when Rodney died.
Yes, sir. It would have. Ms. De Souza, other than this instance where you were arrested, do you remember an incident which may have occurred in August of 1979 at a meeting in Carmerville area?
Yes.
Do you care to tell the members of the commission what would have happened at that time, at that meeting in Carmerville?
Before the meeting could get,
You can go ahead, Ms. De Souza.
the meeting never actually got started. There were a lot of police there when we arrived, I believe, and they essentially charged those of us that were there. So everybody ran. I couldn't run very fast, so I sat. Moses Bagwan's hand was broken by one of the attackers. Walter, I guess, was a pretty fast runner and jumper, and he escaped. I'm not sure the various ways that other people escaped, but the meeting was totally broken up.
For clarification, when you say attackers, who are you referring to, Ms. De Souza?
Most of the attackers were police, actually, in uniforms without numbers.
And were they wearing the blue and black uniform?
I think so, yes.
Were these policemen armed with any objects or weapons?
Batons.
And when you said earlier, we arrived, who were you referring to when you say we arrived?
A group of people that were supposed to be setting up the meeting, speaking at the meeting, and so on.
Can you remember their names at this time?
I think Nigel Westmus was one of them. I don't remember too many others.
You said you remained seated, or you took a seat?
Well, I started to run and then I sat
And then
as the baton was descending. So it didn't actually touch.
So it didn't actually touch. And what happened after this, what you described as your attackers? What happened after that incident?
I think some people might have been arrested. I'm not sure though. But there was a lot of fun being made about how fast Walter could run. So the Prime Minister of the day was offering to send him to the Olympics and so on.
Understood, Ms. De Souza. Now, in 1980, I want to take your mind to the month of June 1980. Could you tell the members of the commission where you were residing at that time?
At 45 Kroll Street, Stabrook.
Ms. De Souza, do you recall the 13th of June 1980?
I do.
At this time, do you care to share with the members of the Commission what you recall about that date?
I can say what I actually recalled, which is in fact rather less than is contained in the statement that I gave soon after the...
You are free if you wish. It's already tendered and marked as an exhibit. You're free to refresh your memory from your statement.
I was in the flat. We lived at 45 Kroll Street, and I was the other occupant of the flat at the time. And I went downstairs responding to very urgent ringing and banging on the door, and found that it was Donald Rodney banging at the door, who said, according to the statement, there's been a terrible accident or something terrible has happened. And we had to go. He asked who else was there in the house. And we went upstairs. He repeated to Andai that we needed to go and see what happened to Walter. And we left, Andai and I left the house together and got separated. I think I went ahead of Andai. Found on John Street, close to Hatfield Street, found a crowd of people there. Lots of them were members of the death squad. There was a car, the roof was blown off, and a shape that was not, that seemed kind of boneless was in the car. They faced forward. I essentially recognized that it was Walter, and tried to get closer to the car. Was named by one of the death squad people and moved away, and eventually returned home, where Donald was still there, he was bleeding, and I tried to tend to his injuries.
All right, Ms. De Souza.
I'm sorry, I missed something. She tried to get close and something happened?
In relation to the portion of your evidence when you tried to get close, you said a death squad member called
A member
you?
of the death squad called me by name, and I moved out of the crowd and left.
And when you left there, where did you go?
I went back home.
You went back home. Just some details. When you heard the door and you said it was frantic and you saw Donald Rodney, first things first, did you know Donald Rodney before the 13th of June 1980?
I did.
And how did you come to know Donald Rodney before that date?
I had seen him at Walter's house.
And are you aware of any relations between Walter Rodney and Donald Rodney?
Yes, I knew they were brothers.
When you first saw Donald Rodney on the night of the 13th of June 1980, could you describe to the best of your recollection how he appeared to you?
He was bleeding. He was clearly in great distress.
When you said you took Donald Rodney upstairs, who else was upstairs?
And I.
Other than yourself, Donald Rodney, and I, Was there anyone else in the building?
Nobody else was there.
Now, before you heard the frantic banging on the door, which turned out to be Donald Rodney, before he arrived there, you and I were alone in the house, or you were at home?
Correct, yes.
Before the banging on the door, did you hear anything before that?
Yes, we heard a loud explosion.
You heard a loud explosion. Could you tell the members of the commission around what time it was that you would have heard that explosion?
No, according to the statement, it was around 8. I think it would have been sometime around 8 p.m.
Around 8 p.m. At this time, are you able to tell the members of the commission how much time would have elapsed between hearing the explosion and hearing the banging on the door?
It seemed to be fairly quickly after.
Quickly after.
Yes.
All right. And from the time you saw Donald Rodney at the door and you took him upstairs up until the time you arrived at John Street, can you estimate how much time had elapsed?
No, it seemed, things seemed to be moving both in slow motion and very quickly. But I don't think much time elapsed because once he was upstairs, Donald's concern was for us to go and check what was happening with Walter.
You said you and I left. Did Donald Rodney accompany you back to John Street?
No, we left him in the house.
Now, when you arrived at John Street, Ms. De Souza, could you describe to us exactly who you would have seen present there?
Some of the people that I recognize as being members of the death squad. I imagine there may have been some residents. But the police were certainly trying to keep people away from the car.
What is the closest you would have gotten to the car that night?
I was able to get very close to it, to the passenger side of the
You
car.
were able to?
Yes, I was.
Did anyone assist you in getting close?
No, I used to be fairly small, so I could pass between the spaces.
Okay. Now, approximately how many members of the death squad would you have observed there that night? If you can quantify how many you would have seen.
I don't know. They certainly, I would say, made up the majority of the crowd that was there, and surrounded the car.
Did you see any members of the government present there at the time?
I don't remember seeing any members of the government.
Did you see any of the House of Israel personnel or members present there at the time?
I don't remember seeing any House of Israel.
When you were allowed to get to the passenger side, were you able to see the color of the car?
I think it was a white car.
Were you able to observe the number plate on the car?
No, I didn't look at the number plate.
Other than what you described as boneless, bent downwards, was there anyone else inside of the car?
No.
You said you were sure that it was Walter Rodney in the car.
Yes.
Could you tell the members of the commission what led you to that belief, that it was Walter Rodney present in the car?
Well, I think first because Donald said that he and Walter had been driving along John Street. And secondly, recognizing, I guess, his profile and what I could see of his head and whatever part of his face that I could see.
Before that evening, the night of the 13th of June 1980, when was the last time you would have seen Donald Rodney?
I don't remember.
You don't remember. What about before the same night, the 13th of June 1980, when was the last time you would have seen Walter Rodney?
I don't remember.
Back in or around the time 1980, June 13, when you saw Walter in the car in that condition, did you have any opinions as to what may have happened?
Essentially that he had finally been killed by the government.
Could you tell the members of the commission what led you to that assumption or belief? And by use of the word finally?
Well, one, the very seriously adversarial posture of the WPA and the PNC. The fact that two party members had been killed before Walter was killed. The fact that I think at one of the, or at more than one of the big PNC rallies, the Prime Minister had been uttering threats about make your wills and sharper steel and so forth.
Making wills? Could you repeat these statements you just said, Ms. De Souza?
That the people in the worst possible alternative should make their wills, that the worst possible alternative is the way the WPA was named by the government of the day, and that the steel of the PNC was sharper than any steel that the WPA might have.
And who would have made these statements, Ms. De Souza?
The Prime Minister of the day, Forbes Burnham.
Can you give us details in relation to where these statements were made?
I think some of them were made at the Square of the Revolution.
And what was the occasion there at the Square of the Revolution?
I don't know, it might have been an anniversary rally or something.
Anniversary for who?
For the People's National Congress.
You spoke about one of the reasons for you having this assumption that Walter had finally been killed is that two party members were killed. Could you first, Ms. De Souza, identify the names of those two party members who were killed?
One of them was Ohene Koama, Ohenekaoma, and the second was Edward Dublin. Dublin. Dublin.
Can you at this time assist the members of the Commission by giving us details of these two incidents, if you have any knowledge as to what may have occurred?
Ohene, as I recall, was shot in the area called Shirley Field Ridley Square, and Edward Dublin was shot in Linden.
Can you recall the dates that these incidents may have occurred?
I think O'Hinney was killed in, what was it, 78 or 79? No, I don't have the date.
You can't remember the exact
No.
date. It was before 1980.
Yes,
And what about Dublin?
before 1980 as well.
Before 1980 as well.
Yes.
Would that have been in before 1978 or about 1978 or what?
Was it
It would be either 78 or 79.
was either 78 or 79?
For
Yes.
both?
For both of them or
Y-
one?
yes, for both.
Thank you.
Do you have any information in relation to the circumstances surrounding these shootings?
No, I don't.
You don't. But you said in your evidence, Mr. Souza, that they were killed by the government. Why did you make that statement, Mr. Souza?
The killed by the government insofar as the police were following instructions of the government as an arm of the state. I think an inquest was held into the O'Hinney killing, and yeah, so the lots of the, I guess, public attitude of the government was, you know, this is what happens when you oppose us.
Was anybody ever charged with those murders, to the best of your knowledge, those killings, to the best of your knowledge?
Not as far as I recall.
Do you have?
I understand the witness to be saying, though, that they were killed,
Killed.
shot by police.
Yes.
Yes.
Just to be clear.
Are you aware of what was the finding of the inquest?
No, I don't remember.
If I may have one moment, please. Mr. Souza, before coming to testify, you are aware that this commission was founded on several terms of reference.
Yeah.
Are you aware of what the terms of reference are in particular?
I don't remember specifically.
Specifically. Yes. I would like at this time, Mr. Souza, if you could have a look at the terms of reference.
Yes.
Having looked at the questions posed in the terms of reference, Mr. Souza, are you in a position to make any comments in relation to any of the terms of reference stated there to assist the members of the commission? In particular, term of reference number 1, which speaks to the, I think it's the political atmosphere at that time. The atmosphere.
Yeah, the facts and circumstances. I don't have any specific facts beyond those I've already outlined, as I recall. And in terms of the atmosphere, I think a number of the questions that you asked me kind of tend in that direction.
What about term of reference number 3, Mr. Souza? Do you know one by the name of Gregory Smith?
No, this name came up after Walter was killed, and I think it was publicly exposed by the Catholic Standard.
By the Catholic Standard.
Yes.
You would have seen in the Catholic Standard the publication of a picture of the said Gregory Smith.
Yes.
When you saw that picture published in the Catholic Standard, did you recognize that image to be someone you may have met?
No, I didn't.
You didn't. No. In relation to term of reference number 4, Ms. De Souza, where it speaks to report on the actions or activities of the state, the Guyana Police Force, the Guyana Defense Force, the Guyana National Service, Guyana People's Militia, or those who are in command and superintendents of these agencies, and determine whether they were tasked with the surveillance of and the carrying out of actions, and whether they did execute those tasks and carry out those actions against the political opposition for the period the 1st of January 1978 to the 31st of December 1980. Having read that term of reference, Ms. De Souza, in addition to what you have told the Commission thus far, is there any other incident that you would have recalled, either attending a meeting of the WPA or any other meeting of that nature, where any of the organizations named in term of reference 4 may have either intervened or disrupted?
The only one of these agencies that I had any encounters with in that period was the Guyana Police Force.
The Guyana Police Force.
Yes.
Now, Ms. De Souza, after the incident, you would have given a statement to the police in this matter, that is the death of Walter Rodney.
I saw the statement, but I have no recollection of giving the statement.
Now, Ms. De Souza, in one of the documents tendered today was an extract of your testimony at the inquest.
Correct.
I would wish to refer you to the 7th page of that document. I believe you were under cross-examination by Mr. Winston Moore. It would be number 14 in our bundle, sir. Have you found the page?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I think.
Do you see the portion of your testimony in relation to the address made by the leader of the PNC, tell the WPA to do anything in particular?
Yes. This is saying that he told the WPA to make their wills.
And the question after that was, do you remember exactly what he said?
Yes.
And
That-
what was your response, Ms. De Souza?
That there be no weeping at the bar, no quarter must be asked, none will be given, and they must make their wills.
Do you, at this time, recall exactly what date, or perhaps limited to a month, that these statements were made?
I could not really say. Beyond.
Were they before 1978, after 1978, before 1980, or after 1980?
I would say they had to be either 79 or 80.
And in 80, would they be before June 13, 1980, or after that date?
Before June 13th, 1980.
I'm sorry, I don't know if it's in the document, but could you ascertain how the witness came to know of or hear the statement? Was she present? Was it broadcast? What?
Guided, madam. Now, Ms. De Souza, your reference to these statements which were made, alleged to have been made by the leader of the PNC, could you tell the members of the commission how you became aware of these statements?
I believe I would have heard them on the radio, and they would subsequently have been printed in some of the regional media that we had access to.
And when you would have heard them, you believe you would have heard them on the radio, was it a direct broadcast of the person saying it or someone repeating what was said?
It would have been a direct broadcast.
Unless counsel could be of further assistance, I believe I would have no further questions at this time. Members of the commission.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to clarify a few matters. Mr. Souza, you referred to a section of the police called, which you said were referred to as a death squad. I take it that this was not the official name of that department. Am I correct?
I imagine it was not, but it was a section of the police that has variously been called Black Clothes Special Branch, Quick Response Squad.
And been called so by whom?
Sometimes those are the official names, but the names actually are given to them based on their behavior.
You mean given to them by?
Members of the population.
Thank you very much. You referred to radio publications. Can you tell us in 1980, if you're able to, if there was more than one radio station?
I believe there were 2 government-run radio stations.
Were there national radio stations not run by the government?
No, there was the only non-government media was associated with political parties or the church.
You tell us that you identified the person in the vehicle, in the car, on the 13th of June as being Walter Rodney, and you referred to his profile. Was there anything that you observed which showed distortion or mangling of the face of the person you saw in the vehicle?
No, there wasn't. But I don't remember that the full face was visible, but there was,
profile that you saw.
there was no mangling.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions at this time. Thanks.
Mr. Williams, I believe you do have questions.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I don't think so. I have questions. Yeah.
You do or do not?
I have questions.
You have, you want to take the opportunity?
Ms. 130.
Speak now or forever.
No, well, I don't think Ms. De Souza is going away forever. But I understand you're taking evidence for her now because she has to go out.
Ms. De Souza, you care to tell us about your availability? When next you think you can be with us?
The next time I'm likely to be available is in July.
July.
We have 4 months, so that's good time.
Be brief. Well, Commissioner, I believe you have some brief questions. Go ahead, please.
Ms. De Souza, I'm taking advantage of your presence. Where do I start? The statements that you were referred to in your testimony before the coroner about making your wills and so on. I just want to be clear, those were public statements made?
Yes, they were.
And they were broadcast, you said?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go back to the 13th of June 1980. You told us earlier that there was this explosion you heard shortly after there was the banging on the door. When you answered the call, if I may describe it that way, it was Donald Rodney. And based on what he said, he was concerned that you and I go to see what was wrong with Walter.
Correct.
I would like you to, I know you said you're very, well, I have the impression you're very hazy. Try the best that you can. From the moment you heard the explosion to the time you got on the scene where this accident occurred, or where this explosion occurred, how long, in your estimation, would that have been?
I believe the information in the evidence given to the inquest, which in any case was some time after the fact. I think I'm saying something like 20 minutes from leaving the house to getting back to the house.
20 minutes? No,
20 minutes.
sorry. I want to know from the time you left,
To get to the
how
scene.
long to get to the scene, not to return.
Oh, that would have been 2 or 3 minutes.
2 or 3 minutes. Okay. Did you hear any police siren? You know the usual siren we have, the wailing sound,
Yeah.
like ambulance.
No,
Did you hear any sound?
there were no sirens, and I mean that's one of the reasons we dismissed the loud noise that we heard, which the explosion that we heard.
When you got to the scene, were there any marked police vehicles?
Not that I recall.
Was there any marked ambulance on the scene?
Not that I recall.
You see, what I'm trying to find out, based on your evidence, you said members of the death squad were there. And what is troubling me, see if you can assist me. Are you trying to tell us that they were there already, or they arrived with alacrity, having heard this explosion, wherever they were, maybe nearby, that they came quickly upon the scene?
Yes.
No, tell me.
That they were already there when I got there, which was...
You said about, see, that is why I started at the beginning,
Mhm.
from the moment you heard the explosion to the time you got on the scene. Did you say about 3 minutes?
No, sorry. It would have been 3 minutes from the time I left the house. I would say maybe 8 minutes, 10 minutes from the explosion to when I got to the scene.
Is there any, because this was around near to the prisons, am I right in terms of proximity, near to the prisons?
Yeah, it's just about a block from the prisons.
At the time, was there any police station nearby?
There's always been the Brickdam police station, which is further along, I think a few blocks west of John Street, on Brickdam.
But I think in answer to my sister earlier, the names of the death squad, and you said, how did they get these names? And one of the description, one of the adjectives you use, I believe, was that the alacrity with which they respond to whatever situation may have arisen from time to time. Yes. How? I want you to tell us some more. Did you get the impression they were already there, or they came very quickly on the scene, having heard the explosion?
I would imagine they came very quickly to the scene. I don't remember Donald saying anything about them being near to the car when he left the car.
Okay, I remember reading your name some time ago abroad. I'm taking you back now. When you said you got to the scene, a member of the death squad called you by your name. My question is, were you a prominent member of the society or of the WPA so that you were well known at the time?
Yeah, I was well known to the police at the time, yes.
I see. May I ask you this? You seem to have described a very difficult period of your life with the police, that you were arrested a number of times. As you sit there giving your testimony, do you have any ill feeling or thing about the police?
No, I get along very well with the police these days.
What is troubling to me, I know a lot of people don't like lawyers. When you were being held, it seems, for a very long time, didn't you or the WPA had access to lawyers to apply for what is called habeas corpus, for them to release you? Tell us. We want to know what the climate was like. The courts and access to justice, access to lawyers. Why were you held so long without some lawyer or lawyers doing something?
We did have access to lawyers, and I guess the courts were probably a little less independent than they are now.
And what would you ascribe to that?
New generations, different global dispensations, different political forces. I was going to say that there was one of the laws in force at that time in relation to the habeas corpus. What was it? The Administration of Justice Act, I think, which allowed the police to act in some unconstitutional ways.
I see. My last question, and it stems from what you said. See, my understanding is that the police should operate under the instructions of no outside, whether president, prime minister, minister, or anybody. Only is a command. It's a sort of military or paramilitary, or commissioner, or the senior super, whoever as the case may be. But you were saying that the police were breaking up meetings and were acting under the instructions of the ruling party at the time. Remember telling us that?
Yes.
Well, was there something at the time being espoused or propagated called paramountcy of the party?
Yes, there was.
Tell us about that.
I guess these were the days before glasnost and perestroika, and I don't know, there was a lot more discussion about ideology in the country. So the business of party paramountcy, which was espoused by the PNC, essentially said that the party controlled all arms of the state and to do anything, then you should be subject or subservient to the party.
I see. So that is how the police came under the control then.
Yes.
When they say, yes. When they say espoused by the PNC, what do you mean by that?
There were some documents. I was a member of the public service in 1979, and essentially every public servant was required to study these documents, the Declaration of Sophia, various documents about national development and the directions within which the country should be moving. So those are documents which laid out what was expected of the population, and I guess laid out the development thrust of the government of the day, which included that it was the party that would lead the way and determine what was going to happen.
I had said my last question, but it's arising out of what you said. Were you a senior member of the public service or
I was a very junior member.
junior member? And pardon our ignorance or mine, can you precede the Declaration of Sophia for us?
I used to know it very well. I don't really remember it. Yeah.
Sophia, because you are the second witness. I think Mr. Rodney referred to that today. I remember reading about it a long time ago, but
What did it amount to though?
what was the gist of this declaration of Sophia?
I think it spelled out what was meant by party paramountcy, I think.
Would there be documents somewhere in the archive?
Yeah, I'm sure these
Did you get
documents
access to?
must still exist.
I thank you.
One question two. Did there come a time when the WPA adopted violence as part of its methodology?
As in fight back?
Pardon?
As in fight back to retaliate to violence?
Yes. There come a time when they decided, look, our constitutional means might not work in getting rid of the PNC, the main opponent and the government, and to that extent we may have to resort to violence. Did they come that time?
I think at one of the public meetings before he was killed, in one of his speeches, Walter Rodney essentially declared that the PNC had to go, and it had to go by any means necessary. And that was kind of a cry that was taken up as a popular cry.
And that was the statement that was interpreted to mean that violence was one of those means?
I believe so.
But do you recall any more specific statement in which he declared violence against the PNC?
No, I don't have any recollection of more specifics.
Did there come a time though when, pursuant to the statement that you just remind us of, when the WPA, for example, was involved in the purchase of arms?
I've seen some of those statements, yes.
You've seen statements to that effect? But are you
Yes.
aware of any cache of arms that they were holding?
No, I'm not aware of any cache of arms.
Now tell me, how was Burnham's statement interpreted by the PNC. There will be no crying at the bar. There will be, let me just remind you of it. Let there be no weeping at the bar. No quarter will be must be asked, none will be given, and they must make their wills.
You mean how it was taken by the WPA?
Yeah, was it a subject of discussion among party members?
I think it must have been. But I don't remember specifically any decisions or instructions being given following that statement.
As an activist then, how did you regard it? The fight was on.
Kind of, but there was very little fight. I mean, most of my fight tended to be with a can of spray paint in those days. And it was essentially, you know, trying to spot the followers who tended to be checking on what was happening and what I was doing.
This came, that statement came after the death of the two party members or after?
Sorry?
The statement came before the death of the two party members or after?
I don't remember, but I suspect it would have been, I suspect it may have been after. But I really don't remember the dates.
The arson, if I may, the arson trial was before or after the death?
Well, that continued.
The arson trial was before their deaths.
Or it continued after?
Yes.
But did the arson trials ever come to closure?
Not that I recall.
So how did you interpret the statement? As an activist hearing it, how did you interpret the statement?
I was a lot younger then. It just seemed to be, here's another challenge.
You saw it as Burnham at his most combative rhetoric?
It was poetic rhetoric, yes. He was very good at that.
I mean, going outside the evidence that you've given thus far, what was the industrial relations climate in the country at the time, you remember, 78, 79?
I just know that the unions were also subject to party paramountcy. So some of the bigger unions were, I guess, not independent as workers' representatives.
So that many of them were inhibited from striking?
Yes.
Or calling strikes?
Striking was equally unpopular then as it is now.
Now, the WPA was the only political force actively involved in resisting the government at that time. What about the established PPP?
At some point, the PPP was had declared critical support and therefore was very selective about what it opposed in terms of government actions. But yes, I know there was also some opposition from the PPP.
Rodney Walter's brother had spoken of the Workers' Vanguard Party.
The Working People's Vanguard Party.
Yes, Working People's Vanguard Party. How effective was that in terms of resistance to the government? Were they involved in that?
I was aware of them when I became politically engaged, but they, I think, went off the scene fairly early, certainly before 1980. They didn't seem, as far as I was aware, to be particularly active.
They didn't seem terribly impactful, or the impression you conveyed?
I wouldn't, not impactful, active. But it was it was a situation where the only available media, daily media, was controlled by the state, which did not tend to report on opposition activities. So it was not a situation in which you can read in the newspaper about a public meeting held by an opposition party or a party that opposed the government. So if they were active, I'm not aware of it because I had no means of being aware of it.
Have you ever come across any reports of Walter's speeches just before he died? Were any of them carried in the press?
In the Guyana media? No, they would not have been carried in the newspapers in Guyana.
And there was no party organ of any sort, WPAs?
The WPA had day clean. I don't remember in fits and starts. I don't recall whether those speeches were reproduced before he was killed. But they do exist as publications, some of those speeches.
Good. Could you point us to where to find them? Because I would like to review them. See the substance of the rhetoric.
Secretariat should have them.
Yes, I've had a hint that we can get them.
Yes. People's Power No Dictator. There's the Arnold Rampersaud speech. There are a fair few speeches.
Well, at this point, yes.
I'm taking advantage of your presence. You told us today, my opinion in answer to counsel was that he had finally been killed by members of the government. And then I see at page 18 of your testimony before the coroner, I think it was Mr. Rex McKay was asking you a question on Mackay. Page 18, almost the third line from the fourth line from the top. Is it correct to say that even after you saw the flesh and boneless remains of your leader, you did not ask Donald how did that happen, and you said no? It seems to be an unusual reaction for a human being. Could you just explain why you didn't ask him?
I think thinking back, it just seemed as though it really did not matter what had happened. The fact was that Walter was dead, and this was really serious. This is devastation. This is all kinds of things. What had happened at that point? No, it's not a question I don't know. I don't even know if Donald would have been capable of answering it. I certainly was not capable of asking it.
You were expecting it? Were you expecting it to happen?
I think we were all kind of living with the expectation that it might happen to Walter or to any of us.
Thank you.
Did Walter ever speak of a kind of premonition that he could be killed and would be?
Premonition, you said? Not that I'm aware of.
He did show any inhibition at all about taking on the role he took on?
Quite the opposite.
I would have thought so. All right, thank you. I think we've gone as far as we could today. Have an enjoyable trip, and we look forward to joining us again sometime after your return. Okay, and I think we've come to the end of today's hearing, and thanks very much for coming today.
If I may, just by way of extension, something said about poetic rhetoric. I believe the line "weeping at the bar" comes from a famous Lord Tennyson poem that deals with death and the afterlife. And the name of it, I believe, is "Crossing the Bar."
Yes, and thanks very much for reminding me. I think there's an Anglican hymn that is partly based on that too. Brother Williams, did you nod in acknowledgement that that was so?
I would not have deigned to query whether you were familiar with it, Sergeant.